right. Hey, welcome to Let's Talk. This is John Kane. We got Regan on the line. Regan, you there?
I am. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Well, we're continuing to work on our setup a little bit here. We're trying to make sure that um, we're trying a new connectivity each week and trying to improve it. So hopefully we're a little better each week, and we'll see how it goes. Anything new up your way in your neighborhood, Regan?
Um, Not really. I mean, still quarantined, but at least the weather's nice.
Well, there you go. We go back and forth a little bit here. We had freezing temperatures last night, but it was a beautiful day today. So, all right.
Did y'all
So
get that snow?
we get, on the weekend there was snow flying in the air, but nothing really accumulated. A little bit, enough. I guess a little bit of a covering, which is it's strange, but not completely unusual for us to get a dusting of snow in May. It just nothing feels normal though, so it all seems strange.
Absolutely. I totally understand.
All right, so we do have a bit of a treat here. I mean, it's a little throwback in one way, but it's also us look doing what we do here. We've got Shawnee Rice joining us. I know that Reggie's working to try to connect up with her. I'm hoping we can get through to her. As you and I talked about this, and frankly, I didn't realize right away, but Shawnee attempted to leave New York City to go back home to Watertown, where she's in that area that she's from, and she thought she'd get out before things were, as things were just starting to heat up a little bit. And well, it didn't play out exactly as she planned. She turned out, she ended up getting infected anyway, and I'll let her tell that story. But I just thought bringing Shawnee back, as as the listeners have become so familiar to her over the last couple of years, and telling her experience, just what she went through with COVID-19, and a friend of hers who also was infected. And being in one of those strange spots that obviously a lot of people openly condemned all those folks who left New York and spread it all over the place, and of course they don't account for the fact that you have a failure to communicate that was so widespread at the beginning of this thing that we all had to make our own judgments about how serious to take COVID-19, because the elected officials, the so-called leaders, they were doing such a bad job of it. So again, I'm hoping that Reggie can pull Shawnee in, and
Still working on it.
all right. All right, I'll see if I can. Maybe I can check and make sure I didn't somehow give you the wrong number. But no, I know I cut and pasted it, so I couldn't have. All right, so we'll try. We'll continue to try to get a hold of Shawnee, and I'm really anxious to hear her story on this thing.
Absolutely. I think she has a very particular experience about having COVID, her experience with COVID, and healing from COVID. And I think that a lot of our listeners would appreciate to hear what it was like from Shawnee, everyone's favorite person.
Yeah, and obviously we do keep tabs on her. We try to make sure that we we check in from time to time. It's funny because I checked in with her right at the beginning when she first left, before she was actually or before she knew she was infected. And then and then as we were going back and forth, the way she was speaking was if I already knew that she had been. So it was kind of an interesting conversation. And then I was kind of bowled over by it all. Let me run through a few numbers here. I mean, just because I think it's still sometimes difficult to put things in proper perspective. The United States has 1.4 million confirmed cases of COVID-19. New York City, all by itself has 350,000. The next country with the next highest level of cases is Spain. They've got 270,000 cases. That's still significantly lower than New York City even. Now, just below them, Russia has run up the list, and now Russia's at 250,000. And of course, the UK also ran up the list. Now they're fourth behind. It sounds like a marathon here, but they're fourth behind Russia at 230,000. I guess what I'm trying to do is put things in perspective. I don't think people realize that New York State has more cases And of course, a lot of it's New York City, but not just New York City. New York State has more cases than any entire country in the world, or at least
Shawnee's ready.
At least confirmed by test. So
I think it's also important to note that Navajo Nation officially has more corona cases per capita than any other U.S. state.
And I think that is really important. But it's funny. But kind of been tracking a little bit the Navajo case, the whole situation in Navajo territory from the beginning. But you know what? I had forgotten. Somebody just reminded me. In fact, I just posted it on Facebook. The original outbreak that the Navajo people, the Navajo Nation, the Navajo territory experienced was born out of a church gathering. They literally had this, and we're not talking about Sunday go to church. This was a major gathering where all the parishes, or whatever they want to call them in Navajo territory, they all sent people, congregants and representatives of their churches to this one place, and that's where the original infection started. And and look, I have my own views about religion and spirituality and that kind of stuff, and again, it's granted that when this first church gathering took place, there wasn't quite the hysteria over it, but there's something really ironic when people are trying to figure out, well, geez, how did the Navajo get so exposed to this? Well, when you start bringing all regions of Navajo territory together for some church meeting, where there are infected people there, and then they took it back to their communities. I was on with Michael G. Haskins yesterday, and we were talking about Navajo, the Navajo crisis, and I didn't even bring up the fact that the initial outbreak, and what really gave it a real boost to spread it throughout the entire territory of Navajo territory was a religious congregation.
Yeah, I think that it's unfortunate to know and to hear, considering that it has spread so deeply and so greatly throughout Navajo Nation. And I really do urge folks to donate to the Hopi Navajo Relief Fund, who's doing incredible work on the ground in order to provide for their community. 40% of Navajo Nation does not have access to running water. So this is the kind of donation that will go to providing infrastructure within the community so that folks can stay healthy and be healthy.
Well, and it's important that you bring that up, because the lack of infrastructure, not just the lack of running water, but the fact that people have to go to a specific place where people are congregating to get water, because they have these places throughout the Navajo territory where you can go and fill up your jugs and that kind of stuff. So even that's a bit of a problem. So the lack of infrastructure actually forces people to congregate in numbers that they wouldn't normally have to do that, and you congregate in numbers where people from all different areas are coming together, and I think that's what most people living throughout the rest of America can't quite wrap their heads around what that life is like. And while it may not seem even to the Navajo to be, because that's the way they've been forced to live for so long, it may not seem like the obstacle that it is until something like this happens. And it clearly is an obstacle. I'm not downplaying the inconvenience of all this, but it's one thing when it's an inconvenience. It's another thing when it's life-threatening. All right. Hey, let's. It's almost like when people say we're going to bring on our guest and she needs no introduction. Perhaps for Let's Talk on WBAI, Shawnee Rice does need no introduction. But we're going to introduce her anyway. We're bringing on to the show our dear friend who we haven't had on air with us in quite some time. We've got Shawnee Rice joining us. Shawnee, it is so great to have you back on the air with Let's Talk.
Yes.
There you are. I was going to say, boy, you've gotten quiet in this period of time.
That's not true. Definitely not true.
Well, and I know it's not true. The one thing I've got to remind people, Shawnee, it was such a pleasure to work with you over our stint together, and it was kind of funny because you you started really becoming more and more vocal. I mean, oftentimes you would beat me to the punch when some of our callers would call in, and Reggie and I are just kind of sitting back saying, "Wow, this is cool."
I don't miss some of those callers. A lot of the callers I do miss, yeah, but yeah, I'm applying to grad school, so I really had to reduce a lot of the things that I'm committing to. And just mental health, as we talked about the last time I was on, we were talking about like dystopia and like the heaviest, most depressing conversation about the future of us in this country and everything. But yeah.
Yeah, we really were. We're talking about this notion of dystopian futures, and then a pandemic hits. I mean, it's like, who knew, right? I mean, it's unfreaking believable. And of course, so you start getting things in order because you're gonna go to school, and then this happens. It's like, so as they say, the best laid plans of mice and, well, they say men, but human beings.
Well, the biggest irony is that as soon as the city shut down, my best friend from Watertown and I, she lives in Brooklyn too, we decided we'll just come up to the city because we both are privileged enough to work from home. Mm-hmm. And she gave Corona to me on the ride up because we were, like in the car together for 6 hours, and she had symptoms. And so I ended up getting it immediately.
Well, was the city even really shut down? Because you left on like the 13th of March. I mean, my last show in studio was on the 5th, and before they were really making any large public proclamations, that's when I decided I'm not going back. I mean, in fact, Regan was supposed to go do the South by Southwest Arts Festival. And I was expecting her to call in, and they canceled that. That was my first indication that things were pretty rough.
Well, my job had even though I'm still considered an essential worker, I just do data, so they made internal decisions not to allow us back into the office yet. So once that happened, I went home immediately. And then, my brother had just moved in with me because he's about to start his drag career in New York City, and he was there for a week, and then all the bars closed. So, he came back. He's now back upstate in Rochester. But, everything shut down pretty quickly, and it took a while for upstate. You know how upstate is.
Yeah.
So backwards.
Yeah.
It took a very long time.
Wednesday
Westwood. Wednesday was actually camping out on our land for over a month, just to get away from.
Well, and again, to
isolate an extreme degree.
To re-emphasize the irony of this is that you essentially leave New York on the 13th of March to kind of avoid what is beginning to ensue in New York. And I mean, this is before New York is really considered the hotspot. People are still talking about Washington State at that time, because that's where there was such a big infection rate. So you leave on the 13th with your best friend, and you literally bring COVID-19 with you in your car, both in your friend and then ultimately with yourself. I mean, and again, I know how many people were being condemned for making this exodus out of New York, but look, there was nobody suggesting that there was any way to. I mean, at that early time, it's hard to criticize you for going home, and I'm certainly not trying to add to that, but it's pretty incredible. Yeah. It's pretty incredible.
Well, we went home because we can work from home, and we thought if our parents need support, if they get it, we would be there to support our parents, because both of our parents are also essential workers, and my mom's a home health aide, so she's going in to terminally ill patients all the time, and my dad works at a food bank situation, so they're out there every day. And then I had it. I was number 6, and my best friend was number 5 in Jefferson County of cases.
Yeah, that's incredible that you guys represent some of the first cases in the entire county. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, and it's also people are going to Target with flip-flops and no mask, no gloves. This is dumb. And then, like a week later, I'm like, oh, well, I'm positive, so I can tell you that you should actually like protect yourself.
Now I got to ask you: is there any
Yeah,
is there any suggestion or indication that you may have infected anybody beyond you and your friend? Sharing COVID-19.
The only thing we were nervous about was the rental car that we got in, because clearly that was infected. But I mean, we wiped it down before and we wiped it down after, but that was our biggest concern, because we both isolated, I mean, like in our room, didn't leave our rooms except to like go to the bathroom and maybe sometimes grab food for like a month straight. So my parents didn't get it. My parents, I mean, well, they isolated as well. They don't have any symptoms, and they were allowed to go back to work because I was state quarantined and they were state isolated.
Now, how about your brother? He checked out okay?
Yeah, I actually didn't have taste or smell for like 2 months. I just got it back fully.
Now, did you have any other symptoms? I mean, were you? Did you have any like flu-like symptoms?
Not bad. Mine really wasn't that bad. I just had it felt like allergies. Like I had congestion for a little bit, and then I couldn't taste or smell. But that was my biggest symptom. I'm tired, but I'm tired all the time. Mm-hmm. So I had a really light case of it, but the smell and the taste, I couldn't smell the taste for about 2 months.
Now, what about your friend? You suggested to me that she had it worse than you did.
Oh, she had it way worse than I did. Way worse. She's good now. She's been okay for about 2 weeks. But she went up, got better, or she had symptoms, got better, and then it like came back like hard, and she couldn't get out of bed. She couldn't work. She couldn't speak because she was losing breath. Walking in the hallways of our house was hard. And she's a year older. She's 30 and has no health conditions, otherwise healthy. Like there's nothing wrong with her immune system, and she got hit really hard with it.
Now,
for some reason I didn't.
Does she have any? Is there any way that when she looks back, she can try to figure out where and when she may have been infected herself? I mean, because with all this contact tracing and everything, people are trying to backtrack this stuff, and I'm just wondering how bizarre that the exercise really is.
I joke she went to Jersey the weekend before we left, so I make fun of her that she got it there. But her job is she was in Washington. She works for the Women's March, so she was in Washington in January. But other than that, like no activity out of the normal in particular. I mean, and I work at a homeless shelter, so like I have contact, and she does as well, with theoretically more poor immune system. But I'm the only one at my job who tested positive. But that being said, the only reason I got a test is because I'm in Jefferson County. I'm right next to a military base, so that could be why I had access to a test even so early.
Sure. Because
a lot of people are losing their smell and taste and other symptoms, and they just don't have access to a test.
Mm-hmm. Now, tell me, approximately what was the lag between your friend showing symptoms and you first realizing that you may be infected?
She had a cough on the ride up, so like that was the 13th, and then I experienced like symptoms of like allergies or a cold the last week of March. But because she tested, she had to go to the emergency room because she couldn't breathe, and this was like the early onset of it. So her dad's a doctor, so her dad, encouraged her to go to the emergency room, and so she got tested, or like the first week or second week we got there, and because she tested positive and told them that we rode up together, the state made me get tested the 29th, or the 20th. whatever the Sunday before the 29th was, and then I experienced symptoms of like a cold for like 5 days, and then I was fine, except for taste and smell.
So essentially, it took a week before you developed any sense that you may have been infected. Obviously, the test confirmed it, but looking back, it took you about a week after the ride up to.
Yep.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, because I think it's important that people, look, we hear from medical professionals and all these talking heads on television, but I think to get a sense from a real life experience, and especially looking at two young women who have similar health, are similarly healthy, and to even see the difference in how she responded to the infection versus how you responded to the infection. I think it kind of highlights the not just the unpredictability of it, but the unpredictability of the outcomes.
And well, my mom. Sorry.
Hey, John, check your feedback.
My mom is a nurse also, and so she was asking me all.
I'm getting a big return.
Like, what does my best friend eat, and what do I eat? Is it our diet? Is it like the amount of stress we have in our lives? And we don't know. We eat pretty similarly, I would say, but I don't know. I don't have any explanation of why it would have hit her, and I barely experienced anything.
I think that's why this pandemic for so many people is, obviously any pandemic is scary, but I think so many people react differently.
I'm still hearing the feedback.
COVID-19.
But not as much.
Like there is varying degrees of like, just loss of taste and smell to being on a ventilator. Like there's such a, across different age groups and across, ability and across a number of different characteristics, if you will. And I think that is one of the reasons that COVID-19 is so scary. And so it's interesting to hear that both of y'all were infected around the same time. Both of y'all had different experiences, and that even varies from the experiences being had by other people.
Yeah. And I think a large part of what, because everybody's working remotely, and part of the COVID epidemic that's getting left out is like the mental part of this. Is because so for example, my best friend she got very, very depressed and was having panic attacks almost every day because of, well, one, we're in Watertown, New York, which we both hate being here, like politically and all the people, but the idea of now being forced back into our like child room bedroom for like 23 hours a day, every day, really messes with your mentality. And so when you go back to work and people expect you to be like,
John,
answering these emails,
lowering your
return. You were tired for a week, or you can't taste or smell. They're missing a huge mental component to like what isolation at its best, like you in a room, really how it really impacts you, especially like in the workplace. And I think a lot of people aren't talking about that necessarily.
I think that a lot of people aren't talking about, I know that the new term is called quarantine fatigue, which is not even referring to people who are ill, but referring to people who are just like quote unquote tired of being quarantined and therefore are, experiencing depression and anxiety, which might be new to some people. For me, it is not, but for some people,
it's not for me either.
So I was wondering if if there is something that you found to be the most helpful for you during this process.
Well, I have a therapist, which helps astronomically, but my life switched from being in Brooklyn to my parents' house. So one, I had to acknowledge that that's a huge thing, although I'm like, no, it's fine. And then two, creating routines just as like you would some sort of stability that you can predict. I ordered like 12 books here, so I'm doing a lot of reading, a lot of coloring. And like that has helped me. And do Zooms as much as you want or don't want, because I hate being on Zoom. I hate forcing my concentration into one place. Therefore, I can't participate as much as I want to. And everybody is offering Zoom. You know, everybody, every agency, every person is like, oh, feel free to Zoom. But it's all at my work. We Zoom all the time too. And so part of my like boundary is putting limits on Zooms and saying like, yeah, I can't attend. I just need to like color, you know, and do a repetitive task helps me like calm my brain and my mind. And, you know, luckily like with my parents, so I talk to humans every day. But if I wasn't, you know, making time to chat with humans every day.
Well, one of the things I wanted to weigh in on, if you don't mind, is you made me chuckle here in studio when you talked about being up in Watertown and just the politics of being there, just because, you know, it is so bizarre that I don't think people can realize, especially when you come out of New York City. So you're not only experiencing, you know, obviously limited, you know, some limited interaction with people, but when you look at everything that's all around you, I mean, I know what it's like because living in on a native territory that's in Western New York, we've got Confederate flags that fly around here, lots of Trump banners and that kind of stuff, and so that's got to be, like you said, that does have to weigh on you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so my best friend, she's Egyptian and Kenyan, but we grew up together in a small town here. So we already have a real, like, uncomfortable, like, tension when we come here. And, you know, there's a huge military presence here also because Fort Drum is right where we are. So there's, like, this level of patriotism that is, like, very, very, very overwhelming. But Watertown organized a protest, which, I mean, I have never heard of that before. And the protest was like, open up the economy. And of course it was like 9 trucks that like drove around, and they were like, the local news covered it. And, you know, I was just like, as somebody who has organized and worked on protests and like actions, like there was no message. They just drove around with flags. Like their purpose was stupid. Absolutely nothing happened from that. But also, like, this was like, they don't believe that this is a big deal. They think that they're starting to do stupid stuff, like compare being quarantined to like being in prison, or like feel like it's like slavery, that they can't leave their house, or like this is now when they should exercise their right to have guns because the government is controlling us. And like, it's just really like, this is why I left this area, and to be back here during this time is very like Twilight Zone-y.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
Friends who have gone back to their hometowns in an attempt to quote unquote escape New York, and a lot of them being queer and people of color. Their experience is just as traumatizing in relation, like they have 2 aspects that they have to deal with. One is this constant fear and stress of a pandemic, and even whether they are sick or not, let's just assume that they are sick, so they're ill and having to deal with this pandemic, this crazy, and on top of that, you have to deal with the same social and political climate that existed previous to the pandemic, and to see how they've melded in the most horrible way, I can't even imagine. Like, I'm still in New York City. I'm still in occupied Brooklyn, and I definitely can feel this quote unquote quarantine fatigue. But luckily, no one is walking down driving down my street, trying to open things up or carrying a Confederate flag. So I can't even imagine the coupling of those 2.
Well, it's that, and like the small townness of it. So thinking if you're a queer trans person of color and you come to one of these hospitals and ask for help, that I would be horrified. I'm kind of horrified to like go to hospitals here as myself, because it's just like small town stuff. The access to things are limited. If I want to go to like a real doctor's office, I have to go to Syracuse, which is like an hour away. And so, yeah, and there are a number of people of color here, like largely because of the military, but because then that brings other family members and friends who are people of color who are here. And like especially like if they're Asian, and, Trump's first rhetoric around this was like it's the Chinese fault. And like, this is where the weight of what the president says makes a huge impact, because it's so small town here. It's like access to is so limited to the real world or to anything outside just this county is so limited.
I think that it's also important to note that there have been horrible hate crimes here in New York City as well against Asian Americans, and that the capital of global capitalism, or this place where people are supposed to be, everyone's accepting of everyone, which is a complete, that's a horrible narrative. That's not real. So even outside of small towns, we still see that rhetoric slowly trickling in.
Well, the other thing I wanted to add to this,
being personified into hate crimes against Asian Americans.
At the beginning of the show, we talked about the Navajo circumstance, and part of the reason I mentioned the fact that the initial outbreak in Navajo territory was church related is because I'm starting to see an increasing number of posts about this has nothing to do with anything but God, and that it is only through Jesus Christ that people are going to be saved, and it's such a travesty that churches are places of worship, group worship are being restricted because that's the only thing. So when I started to see that trend, and then I think about native territories, Navajo in particular, where this whole idea of congregating for group worship contributed in a huge way to the infection rate. To listen to this being tied to that same, not just right, but evangelical right and all that other stuff, it's very disturbing. Hey, look, can you guys, Shawnee, can you hang out? We're gonna take a break, and we're gonna try to take some calls here after our break. Are you up for that? All right, Reggie. Why don't you take us home with a little bit of music, and we'll come right back, and we'll do phone calls. The number is 212-209-2877. That's the number to call to be a part of the show. If you got a question for Shawnee Rice or any of us, 212-209-2877. That's the number to call. All right, thanks for coming back. This is John Kane, and this is Let's Talk. We've got Regan DeLoggins, as usual, and not quite as usual, but used to be. We got Shawnee Rice, who's joining us. Of course, we're all joining remotely, and as I've said before, we're trying to work through the various technologies that are available to enable us to do some of this remote access to our studio, and we get through it the best we can. So that's essentially all I can. All we can do here, and we'll continue to improve the product a little bit as we go. Hey, look, before we go to a few of the calls, I do want to say that we are in fund drive mode, and so and it's funny. I just did Michael's show, Michael G. Haskins' show, Living for the City. We just did that yesterday, and when Michael was doing his pitch for the fund drive, I almost wanted to weigh in, but I didn't. I figured, well, I'll let him do that. But one of the things that I wanted to do was that I think was important was to mention that when you make a donation to WBAI, it's good for the whole station, and there's no question about that. But when you make become a buddy to a specific program, you're sending a message to management. You're sending a message to all to all of it that we are that you support the programs that you're listening to. So while look, and I understand that there's sometimes some very attractive premiums that are offered, and I'm not trying to discourage anybody from going for a premium. But for many of our shows, we try to try to put out there that the content, our shows are the premium. So while all of the donations and the contributions go to WBAI, they don't all send the same signal. So what I'm suggesting is, if you like this program or any particular program on WBAI, it's oftentimes really important to make a donation in the name of that show, in the name, if not while the show is airing, if you're doing it, online at www.give2wbai.org, that you fill in that text box which show you're attributing your donation to. It doesn't come to us. It still goes to WBAI, but it still does make send a message. So I'm asking folks to make a donation. Go to 516-620-3602. Become a buddy in the name of Let's Talk. Make a donation of a one-time donation, or come back as often as you like and make a donation and do it in the name of Let's Talk. It's good for the station, and it's obviously look. There's always going to be some reviewing the programming and the program grid, and one of the things that sends a solid signal to management is when we not only do our job in fundraising, but you send a signal to management by making a donation in the name of a specific show. So all right, the number is 212-209-2877. That's the number to call to be a part of Let's Talk with John and Regan, and today with Shawnee. So we'll start going to the phone calls. Caller, you are up first. What's your name and where are you calling from?
Hey, John, it's Russell up in White Plains again. I'll be short and sweet as I can. Hey, Atlantic Avenue, that's where I used to give $10 and $20 every time you had a movie. So please open it up, because that's how I contributed directly. I'd like to ask Shawnee if she thinks maybe she got tested at Fort Drum, because the military is what brought this back to our country, along with all these citizen tourists that flooded back in. We talk about the Chinese because we don't want to look ourselves in the face. But I'm interested, I gave you, John, a hard time. There's been 50% more murders in April of 2020 because we're locked up like this. 50% more in New York City. And I'd like to know, apparently, Shawnee, it seems like you're open upstate, but if Regan can tell me in Brooklyn, does she think we should stay closed, or does she think we should stay open, or should we, how long? And one more thing. As a proud father of a gay American, it's a little jarring to hear you say queer, but thanks a lot for hearing me out, kids. Bye-bye.
Okay, I'll tackle bits of that I can. I mean, I don't know if our soldiers necessarily brought it here. The cases upstate are definitely slower, as I more than 60 up in this area. In terms of closing and reopening, I mean, I am not, I don't study disease. I'm not an economist. I don't study any of those things. From my perspective and understanding, I would rather be on the safe side than not, and look at other models. Look at how Canada gave their citizens stimulus packages rather than giving everybody the same amount. Where I can rent, a room in Watertown for $500 versus a city where it's $1,000. So yeah, I mean, I also don't know. I don't have much to input about the economy, whether to open or not. But I think people need to deal with things being closed, and just because we're getting bored because we're home, I don't think that's an acceptable reason to open things up. I think we need to learn how to live with ourselves and with each other and without all of these distractions, which, we're getting lost sight out of. I also don't think queer is a negative term necessarily, especially when used by queer people. But Regan, do you want to speak more to that?
Yeah, sure. As a queer person, it's important to note that the term queer has been readopted within the queer community as a means of solidarity and empowerment. It is not in... I remember when I identified as queer and my father was like, wait, isn't that an insult? No, it's not. It's been redefined by the queer community. And I highly recommend doing a little bit of research behind it, because there's some really great papers out there and some really great articles that relate to specifically this reintegration of the term. And it is specifically driven and derived from queer communities.
All right. Hey, let me just weigh in a little bit on some of Russell's comments. First off, there's little question that most of the infection that the United States experienced came from Europe. As a native person, yeah, we kind of been through that route before. So very little came from soldiers bringing it back from China, and and ironically, and Shawnee is basically an example of this. Much of what spread through many other regions spread directly from New York City. So as people are trying to point out and trying to pinpoint who to blame or what to blame, I find a lot of that stuff, it's absurd in the way that people have tried to turn these into conspiracies and either suggest that there was intention or intent or some nefarious reasoning behind how this thing spread. So I don't know. All right, let's go to. Go ahead.
I just want to add one quick thing. Also, since my mom is a hospice worker, she has to ask her clients every day, "Did you leave the county today?" Like, let alone did you leave the city or the state or the country? And so, when I'm saying that it's so isolated and small town and backwoods, people rarely leave the county here. So there's not much like integrating, coming and going, except for some cases like me where I happen to come back to this area.
Right. All right, let's go to another caller. I know we've only got probably another 10 minutes. I think we got to take a news break at the top, so we'll try to fit in as many callers as we can. Caller, you're up next. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Oh, my name is Doval, Joseph Doval. I'm calling from New York. My question is simple as that. Is the since the one when they let the president know about the global warming. So at that time, he said, well, you don't believe in global warming. That was a fake. That was a joke. That was that. Okay. He did not take it in serious. Now, at this particular point, let's say the man don't have his knowledge for this type of things. He put it that way. But again, if had people wanted to go to the United Nations, European, come in here exactly for that, go to discuss the global warming, what they're going to do, something like that. You don't even attend this type of conference because it was a fake, it was a joke, all of that thing. So what I'm saying right now, I cannot accuse the president for that because it's something coming from the earth, something coming from, nowhere. You understand? So it's not something he made. But again, at the same time, he can't blame somebody else for what happened because nobody made it with nothing. It just, it's not a question of a bomb. He was trying to get away from people's hands, so it started going to north, south, everywhere. No, it's just the earth, global warming. That's what it is. Now, the next thing, I think if he had taken less serious, and instead of having 2 million people dead, 2 million dead people, we would have 1 million. He would save 1 million. So it's that particular time, begin with the mask, begin with the, with the glove, begin with the distance, begin with that thing from quite some time, a year and a half ago. By that time, we would not have that much dead people. That's what I'm calling for. So the people are distracted. They go everywhere. And then right now, I think they're looking for someone to blame for that. There's no one. I don't think there's no one to blame for that.
And I agree. I agree that it's hard to finger somebody for the blame for any of this stuff, whether it's anybody blaming China or anybody blaming Europeans or New Yorkers or anybody else. I mean, and frankly, I don't know. We're going to know more looking back on this from years from now. What role global warming played in all of this stuff. There's a certain sense that if something can happen, it will happen. And, this idea that a virus was able to jump from, whether it came from bats originally or animals, and jump to human beings, and it continues to somewhat mutate. We're seeing more and more effects that this virus is causing that goes well beyond what it's doing to the lungs, but what it's doing to other organs, what it's doing to blood clotting, and any number of this new thing they're talking about with symptoms similar to Kawasaki syndrome in children. There's a lot that is still developing in this whole thing, but I do agree that precaution is probably the best way to protect yourself and to protect those who are most vulnerable. And I mentioned it on the last show. There's a certain irony that 30% of the people who have perished because of this disease were in nursing home or some sort of extended care facilities, where they could have been and should have been the most the easiest population to isolate. In New Jersey, the numbers are closer to 50% of the casualties, of the deaths caused by COVID-19 have been in nursing homes. So there is an irony that a population of people who should have been the easiest ones to quarantine still are ranking up as the highest single grouping of people to have died from this disease. So and that's my response. Look, we probably have time for one more call before we go to a news break. So Reggie, why don't you pull one more caller up, and this will be our final caller.
Okay.
Hey, I made it. How you doing?
What's going on?
Everybody okay? Listen, I'm gonna give that girl a chance to get. Am I on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to give that girl a chance to get a pen because
wait. Who's that girl?
Problems with.
Who's that girl?
There was a girl talking before. I was driving. I don't know. She said, "You ready for it?" It's 844.
Wait. What numbers are we giving out here? I'm not sure.
It's the New York State line for anybody who needs some anxiety problems or has any anxiety problems. They could call this for free.
Oh, this is a mental health hotline of some sort?
I don't know.
Well,
you ready? 844. 863.
Okay.
9314.
Okay.
All right. Again, caller. Look, I have no idea what number you just gave out, and you don't seem to understand what number you just gave out. So it becomes a little bit. I get concerned about giving phone numbers out on the air, especially if they're not verifiable but if this is some sort of mental health hotline, I just hope you didn't give something out that's inappropriate. I don't know what to say. All right. Well, let me just say this as we close out the show. I want to remind people that we are in fund drive mode, and we're all trying to do the best we can under the circumstances. I think we are working to improve what we're doing each week, and we need your support. The show needs your support. We need to, demonstrate that you are not only listening to the show, but this is the kind of show you want to listen to. And we're open to any criticisms. Obviously, we're still trying to, get through some of the difficulties in doing this level of remote broadcasting. But make a donation. Go to the pledge line. Go to 516-620-3602. Make a donation to WBAI. Do it in the name of Let's Talk, and we will all greatly appreciate that. I want to thank you, Shawnee, for joining us. I know we haven't done shows on us personally, so the idea of us doing a show on Shawnee Rice, that was kind of a treat for all of us, I think.
Thanks. Appreciate it. I'm glad to hear from both you, Regan, Reggie, everybody.
Well, and I hope someday soon we'll all sit in the same studio around matching microphones and be able to do the show the way we were accustomed to. I don't think much of this is going to be. This isn't permanent. It is what we're doing for now. So I want to thank you for joining us, Regan. As always, thanks a lot, and Reggie, to you, thank you very much.
No problem, guys. We definitely got to share stories. We got a bunch of stories to share.
Yes, we do. All right, Reggie, we got a news break at the top here?
Yep.
All right. Well, again, I want to thank everybody for listening. I want to thank the callers. Hopefully we get through this fund drive and we get back to 2 hours so we can dedicate that final hour and get in the volume of calls we prefer to do. And like I said, we'll keep pecking away and try to improve what we're doing here technologically, reaching out and that kind of stuff. So I want to thank all of you. You can take us out with some music, Reggie, and I want to thank people for listening. Yahweh.